Today we're going to be taking a look at my favorite Indiana Jones comic, 1995's Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny. This 4-issue series was my first Indiana Jones comic back in the 90s, so it holds a special place in my heart. As one of the last Dark Horse Indiana Jones comics, it shows a lot more polish than the rest of them. Take a look at the artwork and use of colors here. A huge improvement over, say, Fate of Atlantis or Iron Phoenix. Originally, Spear of Destiny was conceived as a graphic adventure sequel to Fate of Atlantis, but very little to no work was actually done on the project before it was cancelled. And just like with Iron Phoenix, Dark Horse seized the unused concept. The cover art was done by Hugh Fleming, and you can tell why I was so excited about this when I was a kid. It's a cover of the highest quality, worthy of a place alongside the movie posters by Richard Amsel and Drew Struzan. And here's a look at the subsequent covers. Fleming does an incredible job capturing the look of Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, the artwork almost photorealistic. I never played Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis as a kid, so Spear of Destiny always felt like the true Last Crusade sequel for me. The layout of this cover is one reason, and the fact that a Christian artifact is at the center of the story. We also get the return of Sean Connery's Henry Jones Sr. This is one of the only adventures featuring Indy's dad outside of the film and TV show, and fans of the character will be thrilled to see him play a major role throughout this story. A further tie is found in the opening pages of this comic, which revisits the ending of Last Crusade. The story begins in the Canyon of the Crescent Moon with that great moment where Sean Connery's Henry calls his son by his chosen name. And whereas the film leaves us with a high-spirited ending, here we see Indy and his dad suffering regret as they ride out. The story skips ahead to 1945, a time when the Nazis were on their last leg. Indy is on a dig in Ireland along with his assistant, Brendan O'Neill. I always really like this character. He has such colorful, poetic dialogue, and you can almost hear the thick Irish accent with every speech balloon. O'Neill might not make the greatest first impression, though, as he helps himself to a small artifact. Outside the dig, we have our first appearance of this enigmatic character, or group of characters. Jones feels as if he recognizes her, but she thinks it's unlikely, though you can never tell who a person might run into in his dreams. The light from her mirror reflecting off the cave's spiral carvings, and it soon lights out for Dr. Jones. This leads to a dream sequence where Indy finds himself in a paradise jungle, where he's attacked by a cloaked figure, declaring that the spear is mine. This figure is revealed as Adolf Hitler, hinting at the Nazi presence that will soon enter the story. Our mysterious woman appears and warns Indy about the Nazis getting their hands on the spear. Then we see our first example of using humor to break up moments of mystery and danger. The book has a good grasp of this concept and doesn't overdo it. Indy wakes up at a nearby inn where we meet the innkeeper Connolly. Indy opens the letter and finds it's from his dad, Henry Jones Sr. He explains that he was approached by a Nazi named Dieter Hoffmann and his son Siegfried, inquiring about the Spear of Longinus being brought to Glastonbury, England by Joseph of Arimathea. Later that night, Indy discovers that Connolly and his men are blue shirts, members of the pro-fascist Irish far right, and that they are working in collaboration with the Nazis. A figure appears in his room, and there's a quick scuffle before Indy realizes it to be O'Neill, who came to warn Jones about the blue shirts. The blue shirts rush upstairs, and Indy smashes one with a picture frame before our heroes escape out the window. And this leads to our first car chase of the story. Indy and O'Neill are sitting ducks in a gas-powered rover. They turn a corner and jump out just before their pursuers blow up the car. Next, they hop in a carriage and make a dash for the ferry. Indy throws some cargo in the road, causing one of the cars to crash. Just as Indy and O'Neill reach the ferry, one of the blue shirts, Pete, hits O'Neill with a well-placed shot, ending this issue with a good cliffhanger. Issue 2 sees Indy carry O'Neill as he leaps onto the departing ferry, making it just in time as the blue shirts look on in defeat. O'Neill reveals to Indy that the bullet struck the small spiral carving that he had lifted from the dig site. I love Indy's line here where he warns O'Neill to not tell Henry Sr. about pulverizing a 6,000-year-old artifact. There are a lot of gems like this sprinkled throughout the story. The England segment of Spear of Destiny opens with this gorgeous, wide look at Glastonbury, as Professor Jones relays the story of Joseph of Arimathea bringing the spear tip to Britain and sprouting a famous tree, the Holy Thorn, from its shaft. And here we meet the spirited Edwina Cheltenham, a local teacher and self-proclaimed defender of local flora. Together, these characters determine that the Nazis already have the spear tip, which was housed in a museum in Vienna, and are planning to make a new staff out of the Holy Thorn. Henry shares a legend that he who holds the spear holds the fate of the world in his hand, for good or evil, establishing what is at stake. They set a trap for Siegfried at the Chalice Well. Siegfried is a devoted believer of the spear, but tries to run when Henry questions his fascist alignment. There's a quick fight between Siegfried, O'Neill, and Jones, but Dieter Hoffmann and his goons appear and take them hostage. We learn that Siegfried has led a sheltered life and that his father is grooming him to be the future leader of Germany. Dieter Hoffmann blames Hitler for Germany's failure in the war, saying that his Austrian blood is impure. And we see the spear tip for the first time, confirming Indy's suspicions. Just then, Miss Cheltenham and her pupils enter the scene, providing a great distraction for Jones. One of the Germans, Otto, actually helps him, showing that he is not truly aligned with Dieter Hoffmann. And Indy is more than happy to return the favor. He then attacks Dieter Hoffmann, causing the spear to separate into two pieces as O'Neill and the Joneses make their escape. Later, at the Lady Chapel, they encounter our mysterious blonde woman, who leaves them with another enigmatic message. Miss C meets them by the real Holy Thorn tree, which is secretly kept here to keep it away from vandals. And we also meet our female lead at last, Rebecca, a student of Miss Cheltenham, who is instructed to drive the men into Wales. O'Neill gives Miss Cheltenham a big smooch, and in return she gives him a sprig from the true thorn. Indy slips the spear half into his breast pocket as our second car chase begins. A few shots are exchanged before we get this final image of issue 2 as a bullet heads straight for Indy. Look at the way the background is designed, amplifying the sense of speed and danger. The power of the spear tip redirects the bullet away from Indy, and he gets a good shot off himself, causing the pursuers to crash. As everyone catches their breath, we get to know Rebecca, who turns out to be Jewish, and whose family and friends were all killed by the Nazis. And we get a quick flashback to Last Crusade, Vogel becoming the 7th character from that film to appear in the panels of Spear of Destiny. Now in Wales, O'Neill mentions that he is a descendant of Niall of the Nine Hostages, a legendary High King of Ireland. There is some good banter between the characters as they have to stop off to change a tire. Indy goes up the hill to take a nap and has another vision of the blonde woman, who tells him he has been chosen to be a hero of this land and that his freedom lies beneath the water. But the Nazis show up and, after a short fight, take everyone hostage except for O'Neill, who got away. They take the spear piece from Indy and send him into the deep. Indy finds that his freedom does indeed lie beneath the water, as he finds a priceless treasure trove of Celtic armor and weapons, which he uses to cut himself free. He breaks off a blade and swims to the surface, where he's helped out of the water by O'Neill. Later, they catch up with the baddies at the ferry for Ireland, as O'Neill reflects on the desecration of his homeland by the Romans, comparing it to the arrival of the Nazis. Indy gives O'Neill the blade from before, and they sneak over to the ferry. O'Neill causes a distraction, allowing Indy's dad to escape, and Indy forces Dieter Hoffmann to give up the spear tip to O'Neill. Siegfried realizes that Indy will not harm him, but before the Nazis can attack, O'Neill drops the blade into the drink, tricking the Nazis into thinking it's the spear. Unfortunately, Indy is forced to abandon Rebecca. The boys follow the ferry to Ireland, discovering that they only got one spear tip from Dieter Hoffmann. They are blasted by a naval mine, and Indy has to rescue O'Neill, continuing a running gag of Indy complaining about getting wet, and a funny moment where Indy comments on O'Neill's continuous talking, even when so close to death. But now they've lost the ferry and have no idea which way to go. But the spear tip points the way to its sister. Back in Ireland, Henry and O'Neill head to the dig site while Indy sets out to save Rebecca. And we end this issue on this image: Rain, Ireland. So we're back at Connolly's for the final issue, and Dieter Hoffmann is not happy about Indiana Jones. He strikes Rebecca after she holds her ground against him, and when Siegfried comes to her aid, his father scorns him for his weakness. Indy appears at the top of the stairs and holds a blue shirt at knife point. The Germans are dismissive about the Irishman's life, and this leads to a big fight between Kurt, the big German, and Pete, the big blue shirt. Connolly himself attacks the German, and Dieter Hoffmann kills him in return. Rebecca grabs the spear half, and Indy gives her a big kiss before they leave out the window. Another brief car chase ends in the bog, and Indy helps Rebecca as they head to the dig. There, O'Neill is relaying the story of the magical spear of the pagan god Lug, which had a lust for blood that caused it to kill by its own power. Henry realizes that the spear of Lug and the spear of Longinus are one and the same. O'Neill builds the spear as Indy arrives, but it turns out the piece Rebecca grabbed was a phony. The Nazis turn up, and the real spear half rips right out of Dieter Hoffmann's pocket and is united with the rest of the spear. The spear soars through the air by its own power, killing Nazis as the walls begin to crumble. In the commotion, O'Neill steps on the stone of Foul, and a loud shriek is heard, indicating that he is the true king of Ireland. The spear almost kills him, but Henry grabs it, and blood starts to seep from the tip. It's Dieter Hoffmann's blood, and the German bleeds to death while his son rejoices the miracle. Otto takes the spear tip, but Indy has to let him go so he can rescue Siegfried. But Siegfried dies after raving about the marvel, and the excavation site seals itself up as if someone is telling them to leave the site alone. In a short epilogue in New York, we find O'Neill working as a bartender, having been unsuccessful in convincing the Irish government to crown him king. Indy reveals that the American government now has the spear, having found it in a bunker in Nuremberg. Just then, news of the atomic bomb dropping on Japan breaks on the radio, and Indy is reminded of his father's warning, that he who holds the spear holds the fate of the world in their hands, for good or evil. And a young lady who is the spitting image of the mysterious blonde woman appears in the bar. Indy and O'Neill insist that they know her, but she says only in their dreams. Thus concludes Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny. I think this is one of the best overall Indiana Jones comics. The artwork by Will Simpson and Dan Spiegel is superior to many of Dark Horse's earlier efforts, and the use of color makes a big difference too. I love that it works out as a quasi-sequel to Last Crusade, and that they brought back Henry Jones Sr., who has appeared in so few adventures. Spear of Destiny is set almost entirely in the British Isles, and I don't mind it. I find it to be an interesting setting. I especially like the early stuff in Ireland and Glastonbury. I also would like to commend them for the tremendous research put into this, and the way they tied together Irish and Christian legends. The comic has a great sense of mystery and the supernatural throughout, and balances them with nice bits of humor. Elaine Lee was behind both the script and coloring, and her work really shines here. Unfortunately, this was to be her only Indiana Jones comic. The biggest complaint one might have about Spear of Destiny is the lack of action and lack of variety thereof. There are no less than 3 car chases, and they're all in standard cars of the era. The only other vehicle involved in the chase being a horse-drawn carriage. Indy never uses his whip, and doesn't do much in terms of adventuring, but I think there's still plenty of great stuff here to enjoy this adventure. It's unfortunate that Dark Horse stopped publishing indie shortly after this series, as I think they were heading in the right direction with this one. The next series, Sargasso Pirates, was to be their last for many years, as the very promising Indiana Jones and the Lost Horizons, which featured a younger Indy adventuring with Abner Ravenwood and a cameo by Belloc, was cancelled. So that's what I have to say about Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny. I would definitely recommend checking this out if you can. I hope you enjoyed this recap review. Do let me know what your thoughts are of this comic down below. Hit like and subscribe to stay tuned about content like this, and I hope you all find fortune and glory. Bye bye now.